This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari and I'm back. Thank you to James Dodd for filling in last week. Appreciate that. While I was off sick, Tommy Oar, but also, you know, this is my chair, bruh, so thanks for keeping it warm. Tommy, you know what got me through last week on the couch, battling with illness? The A-League.
Yep.
Round 3, entertaining as always. I thought, let's rip straight into it, mate.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the Wanderers. I feel like the chat we're about to have, we could have had at any time over the last decade. Mm-hmm. And that's the frustrating thing about it. Probably Wanderers fans feel even more frustrated about just what's going on with this football club. I mean, it's early days, right? So we're 3 rounds into a competition, but their game on Friday against Newcastle Jets at Parramatta looks like an absolute must-win, does it not?
I feel like it is. They put themselves in this situation, 1 point out of 3 games, you know, so much riding, you know, at home as well. To play like this and to be so disjointed was so disappointing. And I feel like all Wanderers fans in the off-season went into this season thinking it was going to be different to last year, but they've kind of just picked up where they were left off last season.
It's a bit of a merry-go-round, to be honest. Every year it feels like it's going to be different, and it never is. Everyone's probably feeling like the guys on the pictures that we're seeing right now, just totally frustrated. Juan Mata as well, sitting on the sidelines, dragged at half-time. We'll get into that in a second, but just bird's-eye view, what's gone wrong this season so far, do you think?
I believe they haven't found the right combination tactically because, you know, the squad that they've assembled is, I think, one of the strongest in the league. And the right combination of players on the field with the right tactics, I don't feel like we've seen that yet, because they have so many technically gifted players, and the way that they've played so far in all the games has been very much focused on transition and very much focused on pressing, but not on dominating and dictating the game. And with the players that they have, you know, Mata, potentially I believe he should play a little bit deeper to be more influential in the game, and to get the likes of Borrello more service, because he's shown what he can do so far and he's been one of the only bright sparks.
Yeah, absolutely. With Mata, I think you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking, and when you have a player of that calibre, you sort of, I feel like you need to build everything around him, and it doesn't seem like they've done that. For the priority to be pressing to the extent where he is the player who's hooked at half-time seems to me a little bit backwards. Surely you're set up to maximise the talents of this incredibly talented player that, you know, you are lucky to have. Instead, to have him watching the second half from the sidelines, not injured, a little bit concerning for me.
It's been square pegs in round holes. It looks like the players are being asked to fulfil roles that aren't to their strengths. And with the players that they've got, and I touched on it before, they should be going into games dominating possession, looking like Victory have looked so far, you know, to take the ascendancy. And the forefront of that is not the pressing, but the positioning and the mindset of the team going in. They're very much a team that is looking to press for 90 minutes, which, you know, the way that their starting positions are so defensive, that's not conducive to getting results. And I feel like if they're more attacking in their original positions, then the distances will be shorter and it'll lead to them being more able to dominate games for longer. The advantage you have with someone like Josh Brillante in the midfield is he's such a good defensive cover that it should allow the other attacking players more freedom to attack and to play with freedom. And it just doesn't look like they've found that right combination yet.
So let's hear from one of those attacking players, Brandon Borrello, and then coach Alan Stajic. This is what they had to say after the Wanderers lost to Adelaide United on the weekend.
Yeah, look, I'm obviously well known for being a sore loser, and obviously Adelaide are a great football team, but I feel like they got the result through, you know, our lapses in concentration, our mistakes. So yeah, it's something that we need to look at as a team. We said we need to match them at the start because they're full of energy, and obviously they score a goal, whether it be in the first 5 minutes. It wasn't good enough.
It's not the midfield, it's everyone. You know, you're a collective. You know, I took Oscar Priestman off, but I certainly don't blame him for the energy in midfield. It's, you know, a defensive shape or a press comes from all 11 players, or it doesn't come from all 11 players. And that's the way our team's structured and shaped and told to play. And unfortunately, that wasn't there for the first 20, 25 minutes. That's the most disappointing part for me. You know, if we get beat within our principles and within our intent and positivity, then it's on me. But, you know, I can't accept sitting back and letting the opposition dictate the game, which we saw for that period of the game.
It's early in the season, as I said. He's just started this new club. I would say he's under pressure, though, already, because for a club this size and with the quality of players that, you know, we've been talking about, it's not good enough. They would recognise that as well. But I feel like even if they went on to win the title this season, I'd still have the same fundamental concerns about the Wanderers that I've had for a long time, which is this is a club that doesn't seem to have a strategy or an identity or a philosophy of how they want to be as a football club. What football do they want to play? And how does that flow through the junior academy? What kind of players are they looking for? What attributes are they trying to breed with their kids? How does that then flow into the women's team as well? Because they've sort of been a little bit inconsistent over the years. And then the men's team, we're talking about, not only no success in a decade, and, ironically celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Asian Champions League win at the weekend as well. They haven't won at home since New Year's Day, which is insane and sort of explains why fans don't come back to games sometimes, because it's like, well, when they're watching what they've been served up for so long, you sort of don't blame them a little bit. What do you think about that whole sort of identity piece there?
Absolutely. If you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, it has been a little bit Groundhog Day for them over the last, since Popovic left, because ultimately they've had 6 coaches since Popper left, and it feels like every coach is coming in not with a instilling, there's no club philosophy like you just touched on, so they're not coming in with an inherited idea of playing. The academy, they'll come in and they might clean out the squad and bring in their own players, and all of a sudden you're starting again, and that takes a year or two to kind of get that process, and all of a sudden if that doesn't work out, you're starting again. And if you compare that with the likes of Sydney FC, Steve Corica left, Ufuk Tale's gone in, and it feels like they've just picked up very much where he left off, and the groundwork was already established. And Melbourne Victory similar. They've always had similar kinds of coaches, and there's very much a preconceived way of playing where we want to dominate games. It's going to be attacking football. All the players in the academy are brought up playing like that, so that when they do transition into the first team, it's not a new coach with new ideas. They've been playing like this for a long time. And if you want to have replicable, sustained success, you need that overarching philosophy in a club, and they just don't have it.
Well, that's the thing that I think the appointment they need is a director of football to basically set this philosophy, because the people who have been making the decisions about the coaches over the last period is usually Paul Lederer, who's stepped back this season. And so now I think it's Jefferson Cheng, who had the connection with Stadge from the Filipino women's team and brought him in. And look, as I said, this may work out with Stadge, but overall, I just feel like they're flagging a little bit. They need to have someone who comes in there and sets all this stuff up, because until that happens, it just feels a little bit too haphazard for me. So the director of football, I think, is something that they need to just stop avoiding it, I think. Find someone and let's get cracking, because this club needs to kill it for Australian football.
It's a sleeping giant, and absolutely what you just said is bang on. And if they do bring in a football director, they'd also need to be given the power to be able to implement the ideas that they want. And we obviously touched on the change in management behind the scenes this off-season, and I'm not sure what the current situation is, but historically, there's always been a heavy involvement from non-footballing people making football decisions. And if they want to have sustained success in the future, that needs to come to an end.
Yeah, agree. Let's move on to the Socceroos, actually. So on Friday, Tony Popovic will name what's likely to be a 26-man squad for next week's World Cup qualifier against Saudi Arabia in Melbourne, which is obviously massive. It's basically between us and them as a battle for direct qualification, at least in this round. The Saudis have made their move by sacking Roberto Mancini and bringing in Hervé Renard, which, that's good for them. What a coach to bring in, I guess, and with a track record as well with the Saudis as well. But for the Socceroos, let's look at the squad that Popper's going to pick, and in particular, the A-League contingent within it. So the last window, there were 5 players from the A-League in it. Jason Guerrier, Aziz Bayic, Luke Bratton, Nishan Volupale, and Daniel Arzani. Who do you reckon from those 5 have the best chances of staying in this squad?
Guerrier and Volupale, I think, are nailed on for this squad, and their form so far in the A-League season has been tremendous, and they also were really good in the last Socceroos camp, so I think they can expect to be picked. This is a really good window for the Socceroos from an A-League perspective, because it's the first window where Popovic has A-League players playing match minutes. The last window was still, the A-League hadn't started yet, so this might give a good indication of how willing Popovic is to give A-League players a chance. And Bratton as well, he was unlucky in his debut to play such a difficult game against Japan, but we all know how good he is. I think he can expect to be in the squad as well.
I think that Popper named Luke Bratton and Nishan Volupale sort of from the clouds to some extent. I'm not sure how many people before the squad came out would have expected those two to be in it. The others maybe, and Guerrier's had a case for a long time. It was great that he finally got a look in. I think he's a lock too. But if those guys get in, it makes you wonder who else is possible to get in, because obviously Popper's broadening his horizons to an extent. Like anyone's in play basically from that start. And so one of the names that's come up and we'll hear from Ufuk Talay on this now. Anthony Caceres, he was asked at the weekend whether Anthony Caceres, who's 32, A-League stalwart, been killing it for a long time, should he be in the Socceroos? Here's what Talay had to say.
I'm hoping for Cass's sake. I think he's a great player for us. I think he's probably been one of our most consistent players at the time that I've been at Sydney. Very influential player. He can play as a 6 lower. He can play as a 10 in the next line. So, look, I'm not the Socceroos coach, but I'll definitely be pleased if Cass gets the opportunity.
It's not a bad shout, I reckon, Tommy. Like, he's, okay, we've got heaps of options in central midfield for the Socceroos, but he is a different profile, don't you think, to the other players who've been selected recently? Similar to Bratton, I guess, but different to the others.
That's right. And if you look at Popovic's comments after the last Japan game the Socceroos played, he said that he does like to have one of those technical midfielders in the lineup. And he obviously gave Bratton an opportunity in the last game, but Caceres is very much cut from the same mould. And I'm a huge admirer of Anthony Caceres, and he's very underappreciated in the A-League because the thing about him is he's technically so good that he makes difficult things look easy. So he doesn't necessarily get the recognition from that because it looks easy, but technically he's so comfortable in tight spaces. And tactically, I feel like he's matured a lot over the last few seasons as well. And he would absolutely not look out of place in a Socceroos squad, and I'll be all for his selection.
Yeah. Just very quickly, Aziz Bayic and Daniel Arzani haven't played heaps to start this season for different reasons. Obviously, suspension, and Arzani's been on the bench. Are they going to make it? Or do you think sort of their lack of game time might count against them? Yeah,
well, Behic, obviously, the suspension, there's a big question mark around that. I thought he struggled in the derby as well. So, and against Japan, in the Socceroos last game that he did play, he didn't have his best performance, but at the same time, he's very experienced. So there's a chance he will stick with him, but it's not as certain as it was before the last camp. And Arzani, I think there's a lot of other A-League players potentially who probably have a stronger claim because he hasn't been getting the match minutes, like you said. And the likes of Piscopo comes to mind. And, with Valupale maybe having such strong form to start this season, I feel like Arzani's spot might be under a bit of pressure.
Yeah, well, here's a bloke who might squeeze him out potentially, Marin Jakalic from MacArthur FC. Form player in the competition at the moment, Tommy. And obviously, born in Croatia, raised in Croatia, but qualifies for Australia. His old man was a citizen. Lived in Melbourne for 15 years, mad Collingwood fan apparently. And he came to Australia, Jakalic, wanting to hopefully burst his way into the national team. You think he's done enough?
Potentially. It might be one window too soon. If he maintained this form that he has shown for a few more weeks, he would probably be a certainty in the next squad. Because last season, he only managed 2 goals in the whole season. It was probably not quite the output that he wanted, but he has started this season on fire. And the thing that's impressive about him is that he gets, tangible results. Every time he attacked, he has end product. You saw the cross that he put in last week for the goal, the goals he has been scoring. You feel like with him, he's capable of getting assists and goals, which is something the Socceroos have struggled with of late.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there is a vacancy for a wide player or the way Popper's been setting up the Socceroos is with those 2 inverted wingers.
Yeah.
It's not really the role he's been playing, but he could. Any good winger should be able to adapt to something like that. But there is a vacancy there because Craig Goodwin is suspended for the Saudi Arabia game. So he's not a bad shout for me, I think.
And if you look at the likes of Piscopo as well, and him, and Caceres, these are all players that, like Talay touched on before, are capable of playing in multiple positions, and they have that match day awareness and that street smarts, if you like, on the field. That's very important in international football because international football poses a very different football problem to what the A-League does, and having that appreciation of playing multiple positions and having that maturity, I feel like is very important in national team setup.
Banger, by the way, from Reno Piscopo, who, for me, I got somewhat excited when he went to Victory this season because he reminded me a little bit of when Jake Brimmer went from Perth Glory to Melbourne Victory. A hometown boy coming back to Melbourne, and you just got the sense from their career that Brimmer, as he did, was ready to take that step up as a player. So far, Piscopo looks like he's sort of doing that. I mean, pretty good to start the season, an outstanding goal. We've all sort of been waiting for him to do that next thing, to click at that.
Well, we've seen glimpses.
There. It's a good start.
We've seen glimpses of it, as you just touched on, over the last 3-4 years in the A-League, but it was the consistency that was the issue. And it's obviously still very early days in this season, but he's been tremendous in all their games so far. And he's playing with a lot more energy as well. I feel like he might be fitter than he has been in previous seasons, which Patrick Kisnorbo is obviously something that he values highly. And Popovic, I'm sure, has his eyes on him.
Yeah. All right. So Friday, that squad will come out. Looking forward to seeing what Popper does with that. Let's move on to across the ditch again. I feel like we're spending a lot of time in New Zealand this season, but it's hard to blame us because Look, Auckland FC killing it. On top of the table, 3 wins, 2-0 winners, over Wellington in the first ever New Zealand derby. Let's hear from Jake Brimmer right now, who had some thoughts on where the New Zealand derby might rank in A-League terms in the future.
It's massive. I think, to be honest with you, I was just speaking before to a few of the boys. I think it's a derby that's going to end up one of the biggest derbies in the competition, believe it or not. As you've seen tonight, travelling fans, and the Phoenix brought big numbers as well. So I'll give it a couple of years, and this will be the biggest derby in the league.
I love it. He's given it the non-know at a wedding with the microphone. Absolutely outstanding. I've seen that move before. It's very good. Big call.
Yeah.
But
it was a great start. It was a great start for a derby, and there was so much hype going into this game, also because obviously the first derby, but also it was the top two for playing each other. And that was an important part of this, is how well both the teams have started this season. But these kind of derbies need to grow organically. They're not just going to become the biggest derby in the league overnight. For sure, it has all the makings of potentially being a huge fixture going forward in the A-League, but as it stands, I think the Sydney derby is probably the standout derby in the A-League, purely because it's it's one city, they're two very well-supported clubs, and there's such a geographical and cultural divide of those two clubs, so the Sydney derby will take some beating.
my understanding of New Zealand culture, which is admittedly somewhat limited, is that this is a bit like the Sydney-Melbourne rivalry in that Auckland is the big city, the Sydney, for instance, and Wellington is more of a cultural sort of centre, more of your Melbourne. So, they've got some differences there, which is good. Massive fan as well of the sailors' hats in the port. That seems to be their gimmick.
Yeah, and it could be more reminiscing of a Sydney, the big blue, that the Melbourne-Sydney kind of derby. That New Zealand derby has all the makings to become the next version of that, I think.
Just very quickly, let's run through which of these derbies would you rather watch versus the New Zealand derby right now if they were on this weekend.
Okay.
Sydney derby, I think Sydney derby.
Sydney derby.
Melbourne, I'm watching the Kiwis.
Me too.
F3, I got Kiwis.
Kiwis as well.
Big Blue,
Big Blue,
I got
think.
that too.
Yep.
Original rivalry, which is Adelaide-Melbourne.
I still love watching the Adelaide-Melbourne game, and that one just always has so much bite to it. And since obviously the early days in the A-League, it was kind of the first really fiery match that we used to see, and that's definitely one I still have my eye on. When the draw comes out in the pre-season, so potentially it has the makings to get to the same level as the Big Blue and the Adelaide Victory Derby, but I think it's not quite there yet. But it's only happened once.
They're laying the foundations, like the thing with the billboard that said "Welcome to Ellington."
Yeah.
We took the W back to Auckland. Is the kind of stuff that builds this.
And that's right. And it's all fun and games and great banter, but it's also, it's starting to get a little bit more heated. And then the fans, you can tell it was, there was more to it than just fun and games in what it meant to the fans. And that's kind of all the makings of a healthy rivalry, like you just said.
Auckland, okay, top of the table. They look good. Are they legit contenders though, or is this just the result of, look, the draw has been a blessing for them so far. They haven't had to leave New Zealand. They've played Brisbane Roar, probably one of the weaker teams in the A-League at home. Sydney strong, obviously, but they're now in a situation where they're going to have 3 weeks without a game because they have the bye this weekend and then the international break. What do you think we're going to see on the other side of that?
It is a tough moment to have because they've got so much momentum. I'm sure they wanted to just be playing every week now going forward. So sometimes these breaks can be a little bit, stop you in your stride, so to speak. But at the same time, they've answered every question that's been posed to them so far. Haven't conceded a goal. There's still question marks around them how they'll handle adversity because they haven't gone behind in a game yet, which would make them open up, which they haven't really done. They've been playing, defence has been very much at the forefront of their game plan, and if they go behind, that'll have to change. So there's still big question marks. They haven't, as you said, played in Australia yet. Haven't played the likes of Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City. So there is some big question marks still, but I'm sure they'll be absolutely thrilled with the start they've got, and for sure they're title contenders. You can't rule them out after beating Wellington and Sydney, who are two of the more favoured teams in the league so far already. They're looking really good.
Yeah, and a coach who's done it before as well, with Steve Corica. He knows what it takes to bring success in the A-League. So good start by Auckland. Let's move on, Tommy. Outside of the A-League, but still, it resonates with all A-League fans, I guess, seeing Kevin Muscat win the Chinese Super League title on the weekend with Shanghai Port. So that's his the third country he's won a title in, along with Australia, obviously, and Japan. The only other Aussie coach to have done that is Ange Postecoglou.
Yep.
I actually couldn't find any other Asian coaches who've won trophies in 3 different countries. I could be wrong. It's just a difficult thing to research, but it seems like he's in sort of uncharted territory aside from Ange. First of all, what they've done and how they've done it this season, Shanghai, scored an unbelievable amount of goals. I think it's 96 in 30 games, which works out as an average of 3.2 per game, which is, I mean, that sells your season tickets right there, doesn't it?
Right.
You're going to see goals. It's how good. All Aussie coaching panel as well. Ross Aloisi there, Vinny Erado's there, Greg King, the former Adelaide United strength and conditioning coach. What does this say about the kind of coaches and tacticians we're producing in Australia?
I think we've always had good coaches in Australia, but we weren't taken seriously abroad. And Ange Postecoglou was very much at the forefront of kind of breaking down that stigma from, how other countries view football in Australia. And once Ange had all the success that he's had overseas, other countries started looking at Australia and thinking, oh, hang on, they've actually got good coaches. And Kevin Muscat, I think, is... he's one I would love to become Socceroos coach one day, when Popovic eventually moves on, I'm sure, sometime in the future.
Just had the chance. He said no, unfortunately, but look, it's worked out okay with Popper so far, but I'd love to as well.
And he's a natural leader. Even as a player, if you remember watching him, he always had a presence, and a good coach kind of has always had this one trait where they have the ability to carry a room without being over the top. They're just natural kind of presence and authority, and he definitely has that. He's an intimidating person, and that is important because to be successful in Asia is really difficult because there's also a language barrier there and a cultural barrier that he's having to deal with. So he's shown a lot of maturity to do it now in 2 Asian countries, in multiple competitions, in the A-League as well. I'm sure that he would love the chance to try his arm in Europe one day, and he's one that I think it's very exciting for Australian football.
I think it'll happen sooner rather than later, if not in the next weeks, months, but potentially a year or 2 from now. I think he's that good, which is exciting. But looking at the A-League right now, who do you see as the next coach who's best placed to make that step and go overseas?
I think Ufuk Talay is probably the first one that comes to mind because he's been a coach now for a number of years in the A-League and he hasn't got the trophy yet, but at the same time, every one of his teams has a very clear identity, a very clear way of playing, and they're tactically so well set up. I remember playing against Wellington when he was the coach there, and it was a game that no one looked forward to because they were so well drilled, and the players as well, they wanted to play for him. He really must be a good man manager. I've never had the privilege of working with him, but you get the idea that the players really were giving him everything on the field. And, that has all the makings to be a good coach because the other thing that he does actually is bring out the best in attacking players. And, players playing with freedom and kind of creating a culture of positivity is something that good leaders do, and Ufuk Talay definitely does that.
Yeah, he's my pick as well. For me, it's the fact that he's got a visually identifiable style, which in the A-League is not common. But when you watch his teams play, there's just something about them that you can
He's
see.
clearly
That's
getting his
football.
message across.
Yeah.
That's clear.
And for me, that's a sign of a good coach. When you can see their football and pick it apart from the rest, there's something there.
Completely agree.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
Extra time, Tommy.
Yeah.
Let's rip through these last things. Speaking of Sydney FC attackers, Jayden Kucharski coming off the bench to win another game for Sydney FC. Should he be starting there, especially with Douglas Costa and Joe Lolly out? Or should he be, if he's not going to get a start anytime soon, obviously Courtney Perkins preferred ahead of him in attack the other day, should he be looking to move on, even on loan?
Well, he has staked his claim to potentially start this weekend, obviously with another great performer or cameo off the bench, and the comments from Ufuk Talay after the game perhaps suggest that might happen. But, going forward and looking at the bigger picture, he's now 22 and we all know how talented he is, and we've seen that over the last kind of couple of seasons, but he's getting to the point where he does need to start playing regular football week in, week out. And if he isn't able to manage to get, regular game time between now and the January transfer window, that would be something that I'm sure he'll be looking at doing. But Sydney FC, on the other hand, probably won't be that, willing to do that with the amount of football they have, obviously, as well, the continental tournaments and stuff as well. So, I'm sure they wouldn't be too enthusiastic around the idea, but for him on a personal note, he needs to start playing regular football.
Should Patrick Kisnorbo forgive Daniel Arzani and bring him back into Melbourne's starting 11?
Well, it's a hard one because the other players playing are doing fantastically. Valuplay and Piscopo, I feel like there's no space for him in the lineup currently.
Fair. Second division announcement the other day from Football Australia. It's going to be a post-season tournament, not a full home and away league as everyone wanted. So it'll go from October to December. What do you think?
Well, it's a great starting point for that. And from an A-League perspective, I'm sure it'll be a great kind of, there'll be a lot of scouts and eyes and ears on all those games and potentially, to look to scout the next players for their academies and for their A-League squads. So I think the more football competitions and the more teams, the healthier.
Suspected ACL for Andrew Naboot. Ouch. Marco Tilio's done his hammy. As a result of that, call it early. Do you think Melbourne City will make the 6?
I think they'll make the 6. They've got too much quality. The likes of Matt Leckie coming back from injury as well. I think they've still got enough on paper.
I'm worried about your boy Tilio, though. He's 23, he's just got back. Second loan stint back into Australia. Just done his hammy.
There's no need to panic yet. He's definitely, they've still got enough time. But at the same time, getting his body right is crucial because particularly at a young age, these are the years where he should be playing every game in a season and, getting through it and developing as a player because you learn so much when you do play full seasons and you really mature as a player. So I'm sure he's doing everything he can in his power to get fit again and Melbourne City can't really have him back soon enough.
All right, we've got to be real quick here. Garang Kuo is fit again. In January, should he be seeking a loan from Newcastle back to the A-League?
I think the Mariners should take him back.
They need him, I reckon. And it'd be good to see him back. Finally, let's try and rank these. This is a difficult one. We're not going to do this in time, but anyway. We got the Wanderers Champions League achievement in 2014. We got Ange winning the Asian Cup in 2015. We got Graham Arnold taking the Socceroos into the round of 16 at the 2022 World Cup. All
great achievements. From a nostalgia perspective, it's the national team winning the Asian Cup, but I think degree of difficulty has to go to Popper and the ACL. To do that against, clubs with so much money and resources was an incredible achievement.
So if that's one, what's more difficult out of winning the Asian Cup at home versus getting that Socceroos team from that group into the knockouts of Qatar?
I think Asian Cup at home, winning a trophy is something, to win a trophy is the hardest thing you can do regardless of the tournament. And the Asian Cup, first, national trophy for the men's team, that has to be number 2.
Yeah. Sorry, Arnie.
Sorry.
That does us, Tommy. Job done. Week 3 in the books. Thanks for your contribution. Thank you for watching as well. We'll be back here next week to talk about round 4. See you later.